I thought I owned every secret inside my house, until I discovered the one hidden behind an empty plate. I used to believe silence was the language of power. My name was Adrian Calloway, and people knew me as the man who could walk into any room and make conversation stop. I built my world around control, discipline, and distance. My estate stood on several acres outside the city, with marble floors, tall windows, and rooms so large that footsteps seemed to disappear before they reached the walls. Everyone who worked there knew the rules. Everything had a place. Everything had a purpose. Everything except the quiet pain I failed to notice. That night, the rain tapped against the windows like a soft warning. The clock on the kitchen wall had already passed midnight when I walked through the lower hallway, unable to sleep. The house was usually peaceful at that hour, but something felt different. A faint sound came from the kitchen. Not a conversation. Not movement from the staff. Something smaller. Something hesitant. I stopped near the doorway and looked inside. Under the warm glow of the kitchen lights, I saw a little girl sitting alone at the end of the counter. She was Lily Carter, the daughter of Emily, one of the maids who had worked in my home for years. She was holding a small plate with leftover food from dinner. She was not making a mess. She was not causing trouble. She was simply trying to eat quietly enough that nobody would notice. For a moment, I said nothing. The most powerful people in my world had asked me for favors, opportunities, and answers. Yet this child had asked for nothing. She had only learned how to disappear. "Lily," I said softly. She froze and slowly turned around. Her eyes widened when she saw me standing there. "I'm sorry, Mr. Calloway," she whispered. "I was going to clean everything." Those words stayed with me. Not because she had taken food. Not because she was in the kitchen. But because she believed she had done something wrong by being hungry. I stepped closer, careful not to frighten her. "Why are you apologizing?" I asked. She looked down at the plate. "My mom says we should not waste anything." There was something about the way she said it that made the room feel colder. Emily had always been reliable, always on time, always polite. She carried herself with a strength most people never noticed. But standing there, looking at her daughter, I realized I had only seen the person who worked for me. I had never truly seen the person behind the uniform. The next morning, I watched Emily enter the estate with the same calm expression she wore every day. She greeted the staff, organized her tasks, and moved through the halls like nothing was wrong. She had spent years protecting everyone else from her struggles. Even me. I had spent years believing that providing a paycheck was enough. I was wrong. Money could build walls. It could buy comfort. It could create a beautiful house. But it could not tell you who was quietly hurting inside it. I looked toward the kitchen where Lily had been sitting the night before and made a decision I never expected to make. For the first time in years, I did not think about reputation, business, or power. I thought about a child who believed she had to hide just to receive something everyone deserved. And when Emily finally walked into my office that morning, expecting a difficult conversation, she had no idea that her life was about to change. "I need you to tell me the truth," I said. "Not as my employee, as a mother." And for the first time, Emily looked at me like she was no longer standing in the shadow of my world. She looked at me like maybe, just maybe, I was finally seeing hers. The first thing I noticed was not the missing food or the empty plate. It was the way Emily lowered her eyes when she entered my office, as if she was already preparing herself for blame. I had seen powerful executives walk into that room with confidence. I had watched people with years of experience struggle to hide their nervousness. But Emily Carter, a woman who had never once complained, looked like she was carrying a weight much heavier than anything I had ever asked anyone to carry. She stood near the doorway with her hands folded quietly in front of her. "Mr. Calloway, if this is about Lily, I apologize," she said. That sentence bothered me more than I expected. Another apology. Another moment where someone believed they had to defend their existence. I leaned back in my chair and studied the woman who had worked in my home for years. "Emily, sit down," I said. She hesitated before taking the chair across from my desk. The morning sunlight came through the tall windows behind her, but she looked like she was sitting in a place much darker. "I want to understand something," I said. "Why did your daughter think she had to hide in my kitchen?" Her expression changed, just slightly, but I saw it. The pause. The fear of admitting something she had tried to keep private. "I did not want you to know," she whispered. "Why?" I asked. She looked toward the window. "Because people like me are usually judged before they are heard." Those words stayed in the room. I had spent years surrounded by people who wanted something from me. They wanted access, influence, opportunities. Emily wanted nothing. She only wanted to protect her daughter. Slowly, she explained that after her husband passed away several years earlier, she had learned how to survive by making every dollar count. She worked long hours, paid the bills, and tried to make Lily feel like she had a normal childhood. She never asked for special treatment. She never wanted anyone to feel sorry for her. "I am grateful for this job," she said. "I just did not want my daughter to be seen differently because of our situation." I looked at the folder on my desk, then back at her. I realized something uncomfortable. I knew the value of every company contract I signed. I knew every number in every report. But I did not know that a child inside my own home was going to bed wondering if there would be enough tomorrow. That was my mistake. Not Emily's. Not Lily's. Mine. "You should have told me," I said quietly. Emily looked surprised. "I did not think you would understand." I almost answered immediately. Normally, I would have. I would have given a confident response. A perfect statement. But for once, I stopped and thought about the truth. "You are right," I admitted. "I probably would not have understood before last night." The silence between us felt different. It was not uncomfortable. It was honest. Later that afternoon, I walked through the house and noticed things I had ignored for years. The staff moving quickly through their duties. The rooms that were always prepared but rarely enjoyed. The distance between the people who worked here and the people who lived here. My estate was beautiful, but beauty without compassion was just decoration. I found Lily in the garden, sitting with a book beside her. When she saw me, she immediately stood up. "Are you upset with my mom?" she asked. I stopped. A child should not have to ask that question. "No, Lily," I said. "I am not upset with your mother." She looked relieved. "Then why are you here?" I looked at the small book in her hands and smiled slightly. "Because I think there are some things in this house that need to change." She tilted her head. "Like what?" I looked back at the mansion behind us. For the first time in many years, I saw it differently. Like making sure nobody feels invisible. And in that moment, I understood that the biggest changes do not always begin with a grand announcement. Sometimes they begin with one person finally choosing to notice. After that morning, I expected the house to feel different. I expected Emily to become distant, or perhaps uncomfortable after sharing a part of her life she had protected for so long. Instead, she returned to her duties the next day with the same quiet determination I had seen every morning before. That was the thing about Emily Carter. She never asked the world to be kinder to her. She simply found a way to keep going. And somehow, that made me respect her more than anyone who had ever tried to impress me. I watched from my office window as she crossed the courtyard carrying a basket of fresh linens. The mansion around her was larger than most people would ever experience, but she moved through it like someone who understood that a home was not measured by its size. It was measured by the people inside it. That thought stayed with me longer than I expected. Later that afternoon, I asked Margaret, the head of household staff, to meet with me. She had worked at the estate for nearly 15 years and knew every corner of the property. "I need to understand something," I said. "How long has Emily been struggling?" Margaret looked down for a moment before answering. "She never wanted anyone to know, Mr. Calloway. She always said that her problems were hers to solve." I looked toward the large windows overlooking the garden. "And nobody thought to tell me?" Margaret gave a gentle sigh. "People do not usually tell powerful men when they need help. They assume powerful men are too busy to notice." That sentence followed me throughout the day. Too busy to notice. I had built companies. I had negotiated deals. I had solved problems that seemed impossible. Yet I had missed something happening only a few rooms away from me. That evening, I made a decision. Not one based on reputation. Not one based on what people would say. I simply wanted Emily and Lily to feel that they belonged in the same world as everyone else. The next morning, Emily arrived at work and found a small envelope waiting for her. Inside was a note explaining that her schedule had been adjusted so she could spend more time with Lily after school. There was also a new arrangement for meals at the estate, ensuring every staff member had access to fresh food whenever they needed it. When Emily came to my office, she held the envelope carefully in her hands. "Mr. Calloway, I cannot accept this," she said. I looked up from my desk. "Why?" She hesitated. "Because I do not want charity." I understood immediately. This was not about food. It was about dignity. "Emily," I said, "I am not offering charity. I am correcting something that should never have happened." She looked at me quietly. Why are you doing this? I thought about the answer. The old Adrian Calloway would have given a simple response. Because it was practical. Because it was the right decision. Because it improved the image of the estate. But those answers were not true anymore. Because Lily should not have learned to hide her needs before she learned to trust people. For a moment, Emily said nothing. Then she looked away, trying to hold back the emotion in her eyes. You really are different than people say, she whispered. I almost smiled. Most people do. Not know me. She looked back at me. Maybe that is the problem. Her words surprised me. But they were honest. And honesty was something I rarely received. That evening, I walked through the kitchen again. The same place where I had found Lily sitting alone only days earlier. The room looked exactly the same. The counters were clean. The lights were warm. The silence remained. But I was not the same person standing there. I had spent years believing strength meant never needing anyone. Now I was beginning to understand that real strength was noticing when someone else needed you. And somewhere in that quiet kitchen, I realized something else. I had spent my entire life protecting my empire. I never considered that one day I would want to protect the people inside it. The mansion had always been a place of perfect order. Every morning, the flowers were arranged before sunrise. Every room was prepared before guests arrived. Every detail reflected control. But after meeting Lily, I started noticing the things that were never written on any schedule. The quiet moments. The small struggles. The people who moved through the halls without anyone truly seeing them. A few days after my conversation with Emily, something unexpected happened. The house began to feel different. Not because the walls changed. Not because the furniture moved. It changed because people started talking more. The staff no longer rushed through every hallway with their heads lowered. There was laughter near the kitchen. There were conversations during breaks. Small things. Ordinary things. The kind of things I had ignored for years. One afternoon, I found Lily sitting in the library surrounded by books. She was carefully turning the pages of a story about a young girl who traveled across the ocean searching for a place to call home. She looked up when I entered. Mr. Calloway, do you like stories? She asked. I stopped for a moment. Nobody had ever asked me that before. Most people asked about business. They asked about decisions. They asked about things that could change their lives. A child simply asked if I liked stories. I used to, I answered. Lily tilted her head. What happened? I looked around the library. Thousands of books filled the shelves, but I could not remember the last time I opened one just for myself. I became busy, I said. She looked back at the book in her hands. My mom says busy people sometimes forget what makes them happy. I almost smiled. Children had a way of saying simple things that adults spent years trying to understand. That evening, Emily found me in the library while she was looking for Lily. She stopped when she saw us sitting together. For a second, I noticed something in her expression. Surprise. Maybe even concern. I hope she was not bothering you, Emily said. I closed the book gently. She was not bothering me. Emily looked at Lily, then back at me. She likes talking to people. Sometimes she talks too much. Lily immediately looked embarrassed. I do not talk too much. Her small protest made the room feel warmer. I laughed quietly. It was a sound I barely recognized from myself. Emily noticed. She smiled slightly. I do not think I have ever heard you laugh before. Her words caught me off guard. I realized she was right. For years, I had built an image around myself. The serious businessman. The untouchable man. The person who always had the answer. But sitting in that library with Emily and Lily, none of that mattered. I was simply a man listening to a child explain why every story needed a hopeful ending. Later that night, I walked past the kitchen and saw Emily preparing a small meal for Lily. I noticed the way she carefully checked every ingredient, making sure everything was perfect. You do that every day? I asked. She looked surprised. Do what? Make sure she feels cared for. Emily smiled softly. That is what mothers do. Her answer was simple, but it carried something powerful. Commitment. Love. Sacrifice. Things money could never create. I looked at Emily differently in that moment. Not as someone who worked in my home. Not as someone I needed to help. I saw someone who had been strong when nobody was watching. Someone who had protected her daughter with everything she had. The next morning, I made another decision. This time, it was not about fixing a problem. It was about creating something better. I asked Emily and Lily to join me for breakfast in the main dining room. When Emily arrived, she looked uncertain. She glanced at the long table, the expensive plates, and the empty chair beside me. "Are you sure this is where we should be?" she asked quietly. I looked at Lily, who was already smiling at the sunlight coming through the windows. Then I looked at Emily. "Yes," I said, "because this house should never make anyone feel like they do not belong." And for the first time in a very long time, my home felt less like an empire and more like a place where people could finally breathe. I thought inviting Emily and Lily to breakfast would be a simple gesture. I was wrong. In my world, simple things were never simple. Every decision carried meaning. Every action created a reaction. I had spent years understanding how people viewed power, but I was beginning to understand something else. Sometimes the smallest choices revealed the most about who we truly were. That morning, the dining room felt different. The long table that had always seemed cold and distant suddenly felt too large. I watched Lily carefully place her napkin on her lap, while Emily looked around as if she was afraid someone would tell her she did not belong there. "You do not have to look so nervous," I said. Emily gave a small smile. "It is difficult not to. I have spent years serving meals in this room. Sitting here feels different." Her honesty stayed with me. She was not uncomfortable because of the luxury around her. She was uncomfortable because she had spent so long believing she was only allowed to stand behind the people who enjoyed it. "The table was never meant to separate people," I said. Emily looked at me quietly. "Maybe not. But people sometimes create those lines themselves." She was right. I had seen it happen everywhere. People were placed into categories. Employees, owners, outsiders, insiders. The world loved labels because labels made things easier to understand. But people were never that simple. After breakfast, Lily asked if she could show me something in the garden. She ran ahead with the excitement only children could have, while Emily followed, behind with a smile I had rarely seen from her before. In the garden, Lily stopped beside a small corner filled with flowers. "My mom planted these," she said proudly. I looked at Emily. "You did this?" She nodded. "A few years ago, I wanted Lily to have something beautiful to look at every day." I looked around the estate. There were expensive decorations everywhere. Rare paintings, imported furniture, things chosen because they represented success. But this small garden was different. It represented care. It represented someone thinking about another person before herself. That afternoon, I asked Emily to join me in the office again. This time, she looked less afraid. "I found something interesting," I said, placing a document on the desk. She looked confused. "What is it?" "A review of the household arrangements." She immediately looked concerned. "Did I do something wrong?" I shook my head. "No. I realized something. We have rules for maintaining this house, but we never created enough support for the people who make it feel like home." Emily was silent. She looked at the document carefully. It included better scheduling, additional support for employees with families, and opportunities for training. "Why are you doing this for everyone?" she asked. I looked out the window before answering. "Because I realized I was only protecting the outside of this house. I never thought about protecting the people inside it." Emily lowered her eyes. "You know, most people with your kind of influence would just give money and walk away." That sentence made me pause, because she understood something I had not. Helping someone was not about creating a distance between yourself and them. Real support required listening. It required respect. It required seeing someone as a person first. "Emily," I said, "I want you to understand something. You do not owe me gratitude for being treated with dignity." She looked back at me, surprised. Nobody has ever said that to me before. The room became quiet. Not uncomfortable, just honest. For years, I had believed people respected me because of what I could provide. But Emily and Lily were teaching me a different lesson. Respect was not something you demanded. It was something you earned through the way you treated others when nobody was watching. That evening, I stood outside the garden watching Lily laugh as she chased butterflies across the grass. Emily watched her with a peaceful expression. I realized the truth I had avoided for years. The biggest emptiness in my life was not because I lacked anything. It was because I had spent too long keeping everything and everyone at a distance. And now, two people who had entered my world with nothing were showing me what I had been missing all along. For the first time in years, I noticed the people around me before I noticed the work waiting on my desk. That was a strange feeling for someone like me. I had built my entire life around efficiency. Decisions were made quickly. Problems were solved immediately. Emotions were usually placed somewhere far away, where they could not interfere. But Emily and Lily had changed something inside me. They reminded me that not every important thing could be measured in numbers or results. Some things could only be felt. A week passed after the changes began at the estate. The atmosphere was different. The staff seemed lighter. Conversations that once disappeared into silence now filled the halls. It was not a dramatic transformation. It was something quieter, something real. But not everyone welcomed those changes. I learned that when you change a system that people are comfortable with, even a good change can make some people uncomfortable. That afternoon, I received a message from Margaret. She asked me to meet her in the smaller sitting room near the garden. When I arrived, she looked thoughtful. "There is something you should know," she said. I sat across from her. "About Emily?" I asked. She shook her head. "About the way things have always been here." She explained that for years, many staff members avoided asking for help because they believed it would make them appear weak. They believed the people with authority would never understand their struggles. "You have always been respected," Margaret said. "But respect and trust are not the same thing." Her words were direct, but they were exactly what I needed to hear. I had spent years building respect. I had not realized I had forgotten to build trust. That evening, I invited the entire household staff to gather in the main hall. Emily stood near the back, looking uncertain. She was not used to being included in conversations like this. Neither were many of the others. I looked at the people standing in front of me and realized something important. A leader was not defined by how many people followed instructions. A leader was defined by how many people felt valued. "I have made changes around this house recently," I began, "but I want everyone to understand why." The room became quiet. This estate is not just a building. It is a place where people spend their time, their energy, and their lives. If the people who keep this place running do not feel respected, then nothing about this home is truly successful. Nobody spoke, but I saw people listening. I saw people believing that maybe their voices mattered. After the meeting, Emily found me near the library. "You did not have to do that," she said. I looked at her. "Yes, I did." She smiled slightly. "You know, the old you would have said something completely different." I raised an eyebrow. "The old me." She laughed softly. "The old you would have called it a business decision." I looked away for a moment. She was right. That was exactly what I would have done. I would have turned a human moment into a strategy. I would have hidden behind logic because logic was easier than admitting I cared. "Maybe I am learning," I said. Emily looked surprised. "You are admitting that." "Why would I not?" I answered. "Because people usually think powerful people have all the answers." I looked at the hallway where Lily was walking toward us with a book in her hands. Maybe powerful people are the ones who know when they need to learn. Emily did not say anything for a moment. Then she smiled. It was a small smile, but it carried more meaning than any compliment I had ever received. Later that night, I walked through the estate alone. The same walls surrounded me. The same lights illuminated the same rooms. But everything felt different. I realized that changing a house was easy. Changing the way people felt inside that house was much harder. And for the first time, I was not trying to create a perfect image. I was trying to create a place where people could finally feel seen. I did not know it yet, but the biggest challenge was still ahead. Because not everyone wanted the old way of life to disappear. Some people were comfortable with silence. And they were not ready for a world where everyone finally had a voice. The moment I realized change had created resistance was not when someone disagreed with me. It was when the house became quiet again. Silence had always been normal in my world. But this time, it felt different. It was not the peaceful silence of a place at rest. It was the silence of people waiting to see what would happen next. I noticed it in the small details. Conversations stopped when I entered a room. Staff members looked toward each other before answering simple questions. The warmth that had slowly entered the estate suddenly felt fragile. I knew then that changing old habits was never just about making new rules. It was about changing the beliefs people had carried for years. That morning, I received a report from Margaret about concerns within the household. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that could be written as a crisis. Just small signs that some people were uncomfortable with the new direction. They believed things had worked well before. They believed distance created order. They believed kindness created weakness. I read the report several times before placing it down. The old Adrian Calloway would have reacted immediately. He would have focused on control. He would have searched for the fastest solution. But I was beginning to understand that people were not problems to solve. They were stories to understand. Later that afternoon, I found Emily organizing supplies in the staff room. She looked up when I entered. "Something happened," she said. It was not a question. I wondered how she always knew when something was wrong. Why do you think that? I asked. She smiled slightly. Because you have the same expression you had when you first found Lily in the kitchen. I looked away for a moment. Emily had a way of seeing things I tried to hide. Some people are not comfortable with the changes, I admitted. She nodded slowly. That was expected. I looked at her. You are not surprised? No, she said. When people have lived with something for a long time, even something unfair can feel familiar. Her answer made me think. Emily had experienced that herself. She had spent years accepting less than she deserved because she thought it was the only way to protect her daughter. She understood something I was still learning. Change was not only about improving the future. It was also about helping people let go of the past. That evening, I invited Emily to join me in the library. Rain moved softly against the windows, creating a calm rhythm throughout the room. I want to ask you something, I said. She closed the book she was holding. What is it? When you were struggling, why did you never ask for help? Emily looked down at her hands. Because asking for help can make you feel like you failed. I listened carefully. But you did not fail. She looked at me. Maybe not. But when you spend enough time trying to prove you can handle everything, you start believing that needing support is a weakness. Her words were quiet, but they carried years of experience. I understood then that Emily and I were more similar than I expected. We both built walls. The difference was that my walls were built from power, while hers were built from survival. Both of us had been protecting ourselves. That night, I made another decision. Not a decision that would impress anyone. Not a decision that would create headlines. A decision that mattered because it was right. I asked Margaret to create a new way for staff members to share concerns privately. No fear. No judgment. Just a place where people could speak honestly. The next morning, I walked through the estate and noticed something small. A staff member smiled when I passed. Another person greeted me without hesitation. It was not a huge victory, but it was proof that trust was slowly returning. Later, Lily found me near the garden. She held a small flower in her hand. This is for you, she said. I accepted it carefully. Why? She shrugged. Because my mom says people should know when they are doing something good. I looked at the flower and thought about how much my life had changed because of one child who simply wanted a meal. I had spent years believing power meant never being affected by anyone. Now I knew the truth. The strongest changes often begin with the smallest moments. And sometimes, the person who teaches you the most is the one you thought you were saving. I used to think the hardest decisions were the ones made in a crowded room, surrounded by people waiting for an answer. I was wrong. The hardest decisions were the quiet ones. The moments when nobody was watching and you had to choose what kind of person you wanted to become. After the changes at the estate, I expected things to improve slowly. I did not expect everything to suddenly become easy. Real change was never that simple. People needed time. Trust needed time. And I needed time to understand that opening my life to others also meant accepting uncertainty. For years, I had built my identity around being untouchable. I believed distance protected me. I believed emotions created distractions. But every day with Emily and Lily challenged those beliefs. They showed me that connection was not a weakness. It was something I had ignored for too long. One afternoon, I found Emily sitting alone in the garden after finishing her work. The sun was setting behind the trees, painting the estate with warm golden light. She looked peaceful, but I noticed the thoughtful expression on her face. You look like you are carrying a question, I said. She smiled softly. Maybe I am. I sat across from her. What is it? She looked toward the house. Do you ever wonder what happens when this all changes? I looked at the mansion behind us. What do you mean? You have spent your whole life building this place and this reputation. But what happens when people start seeing the person behind it? Her question caught me off guard. Nobody had ever asked me that. Most people were interested in what I could do. Few people cared about who I was. I do not know, I admitted. Emily looked surprised. You actually do not know? I shook my head. No. I spent so much time becoming someone people respected that I never thought about who I was when nobody needed anything from me. The honesty felt strange, but it also felt freeing. Emily looked down with a small smile. That might be the most honest thing you have ever said. I laughed quietly. I'm not sure if that is a compliment. It is, she answered. Because most people spend their whole lives pretending they have everything figured out. Her words stayed with me. Later that evening, Lily came into the library carrying a small box. I made something for you, she said. Inside was a collection of drawings. Simple drawings made with colored pencils. There was the garden, the house, Emily, and then there was me. I looked at the picture carefully. I was standing beside them, not in front of them, not above them, beside them. Why did you draw me like this? I asked. Lily looked confused. Because that is where you are. A child's answer. Simple, honest, completely unexpected. I kept looking at the drawing long after Lily left the room. I realized that somewhere along the way, my entire life had been built around standing alone. And now, the people who changed me were showing me that maybe I was never meant to. The following morning, I made arrangements for Lily to attend a better school program nearby. When Emily found out, she immediately came to speak with me. Adrian, this is too much, she said. I noticed something in her voice. Not anger. Fear. Why does accepting help feel harder for you than giving everything to someone else? I asked. She became quiet. I understood that question because I had lived the same way. Emily spent years giving everything she had to protect Lily. I spent years building everything I had to protect myself. Different lives. Same wall. This is not about owing me anything, I said. This is about giving Lily opportunities she deserves. Emily looked at me for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. Thank you. It was a simple phrase. But coming from her, it meant more than I expected. That night, I stood outside the estate watching the lights inside the house glow through the windows. The place that once felt like a fortress now felt alive. There were conversations. There were memories. There was warmth. I had spent years believing I was protecting my world by keeping people away. But Emily and Lily taught me the opposite. Sometimes the greatest protection comes from allowing the right people to come closer. And for the first time in my life, I was not afraid of losing control. I was grateful to finally feel something worth holding on to. I used to believe that a person's legacy was measured by what they built, what they owned, and how many people remembered their name. After everything that happened, I understood something different. A legacy was not the size of a company. It was not the height of a building. It was not the power people believed you had. A legacy was the way people felt when they remembered you. Months had passed since the night I found Lily sitting alone in the kitchen. A moment that once seemed small had become the beginning of everything changing. The estate was no longer just a place where people worked. It had become a home filled with conversations, laughter, and moments I never thought I would experience. Every morning, I saw Lily running through the garden with a book in her hands. Every afternoon, I saw Emily smiling more than before. And every evening, I found myself looking forward to coming home. That was something I never expected. Home had always been a location to me, a place where I stored my belongings, a place where I made plans. But Emily and Lily showed me that a home was created by the people who filled it with meaning. One morning, I walked into the kitchen and found Lily preparing breakfast with the help of one of the staff members. She looked proud of herself. I made something for you, she said. I looked at the plate in front of me and smiled. It was simple, nothing like the meals prepared for important meetings or formal events. But somehow it meant more. This is the best breakfast I have had in years, I said. Lily smiled. Because I made it. Because someone made it with care. Emily, who was standing nearby, looked at me quietly. She understood what I meant. We both knew how much had changed. Later that day, I walked through the estate and noticed a small framed photograph in the hallway. It showed the staff gathered together during a celebration. Everyone was smiling. Everyone looked comfortable. I stopped and looked at it for a long time. There was a version of myself from the past who would have walked right past that picture. He would have seen it as decoration. Now I saw something else. I saw people. I saw stories. I saw lives connected together. That evening, Emily and I sat in the garden while Lily played nearby. The sky slowly changed colors as the sun disappeared behind the trees. Do you ever miss the person you were before? Emily asked. I thought about it carefully. The answer surprised me. No. She smiled. Not even a little. I shook my head. That person had everything he thought he needed, but he did not know what he was missing. Emily looked at me. And now? I looked toward Lily. Now I know. There was a quiet moment between us. Not uncomfortable. Not uncertain. Just peaceful. Emily had entered my life as someone I barely noticed. A person I thought I understood because I knew her position in my world. But I had been wrong. She was never defined by what she did for me. She was defined by the strength, kindness, and courage she carried every day. Lily had taught me something even greater. She reminded me that people did not need perfection. They needed presence. They needed someone willing to notice them, someone willing to listen, Years ago, I believed power meant standing above everyone else. Now I knew the truth. Real power was choosing to stand beside people when they needed you most. The estate remained the same. The walls were still tall. The rooms were still beautiful. The world outside still knew my name. But inside those walls, something far more important had changed. A man who spent his life protecting an empire finally learned how to protect a family. And the two people I thought I was saving were the ones who saved me from a life without warmth. I once believed the greatest thing I could leave behind was a name people respected. Now I know the greatest thing anyone can leave behind is a memory that makes someone smile. Because in the end, people do not remember how powerful you were. They remember how you made them feel when they needed kindness the most.